Jungle Doctor's Rhino Rumblings by Paul White. Chapter 1. "Are you coming on safari to the Bayou Tree to hear a story?" asked the twins. Tally, which means tall and he wasn't, and Callie, which means fierce and he wasn't. Gulu, whose broken leg was in plaster, nodded, and they wheeled him down from the jungle hospital in the wheelbarrow. Behind them came Elizabeth and Uditi, and between them a tall girl named Lutu, whose eyes were bandaged. She'd been blind for a very long time, like Lusu, her friend. Dowdy came striding down from the hospital and sat on the stool which Gulu had brought from the barrow. "What's the news of the man who was attacked by Frau, the rhinoceros?" asked Tally. "The news is good," smiled Dowdy. "He will recover. And speaking of rhino, what's the best thing to do if a rhino charges you?" "Run!" exclaimed Elizabeth. "Climb a tree!" shouted Callie. "Jump to one side," laughed Gulu, waving his plaster-covered leg in the air. "Gulu's right," laughed Dowdy. "Jump to one side it is. Rhino is big, noisy, and thinks very much of himself. Listen to a story of the way he threw his weight around in the jungle." Snake raised his head and hissed with satisfaction. He watched Rhinoceros admiring his huge shadow, which the rising sun spread over the grass slope that stretched down to the river. "You're big and strong and important," said Snake, so softly that Rhino thought they were his own thoughts. He bored holes in the clear morning air with his large spiky horn, and a deep rumble came from inside him. "I am big. I am strong. I am important. I am Rhino." Again, Snake whispered, "Nobody gets in a rhino's way. Nobody tells a rhino what to do. He is quite as important as elephant." Rhinoceros snorted and swished his absurd little tail. Its shadow looked threatening and powerful. His voice came through closed teeth. "Nobody tells me what to do. Nobody gets in my way. And as for elephant, I'll fix anyone who talks to me about him and what he says or does or promises." He thumped his front feet angrily into a pool of mud. Snake smirked and thought, "Rhino may be stupid, but he is terribly strong. He can be useful to me." He licked his lips with his forked tongue and hissed, "Ah, there he goes." Rhino ambled down the path that led to the river. In front of him was the monkey's palm tree. A massive rhinoceros shoulder crashed into the trunk, snapping it like a rotten stick. Toto and Coco, the twin monkeys, landed painfully in the thorn bush. Rhino took no notice. He strode on to a place where he found a lump of granite shaped like an oversized watermelon. On it sat Jojo, the mongoose, who always loved to ask questions. Rhino stopped. His red eyes gleamed. "Are you as strong as elephant?" asked Jojo's eager voice. Thunder came from inside Rhinoceros. With one prod of his horn, he sent Mongoose head over tail, and the stone rolling, bounding and bouncing down the slope. Dik-Dik the antelope jumped for his life as the stone hurtled past his head, crashed into a much bigger boulder which rolled into the middle of the road. Rhino saw Boohoo the hippo standing quietly in the water lily pond. With a bellow he ran and jumped, landing splosh, splash, squelch in the very middle. A wave of brown water hit Hippo in the face. "I'm more important than anyone in the whole jungle, and don't you forget it," roared Rhino. He put his head down and galloped off to the shade of the coconut palms. Hippo opened one eye. "Most disagreeable beast. More important than anyone, eh? Surely he shuts his eyes to elephant. It couldn't be that he thinks he—" Sliding by in the shadow, Snake heard him. Serpent's eye glittered as he silently followed Rhinoceros. "It's going well," he hissed. "My sharp brain can use that mountain of muscle to upset some of Elephant's plans." Tweeter, Jojo, and Dick stood quietly watching. They saw a movement in the grass. "Was that Snake?" asked Jojo, fluffing up his fur. "It was," nodded Tweeter. "The thoughts of his twisty mind are more dangerous than the poison in his teeth." Rhino was resting in the shade. Every thought that crossed his mind started with I, or me, or my. Snake glided up to him with a sneer in his soft voice. "Did you hear that Elephant has plans to bring joy into the hearts of everyone in the jungle?" "Tell him to tie a knot in his trunk," rumbled Rhino, thumping angrily into a palm tree. Zoka the snake slithered under the rock to dodge the shower of coconuts. After a while he looked out cautiously and whispered in a voice full of persuasion. Rhino took little notice for a while. Then he made a noise that was as close to laughter as he knew how and said, "Tell me again, Zoka." Tweeter and the others heard Snake's hissy voice. "I saw Elephant on the hillside. Why not topple him over into the river? Prove that horn is better than his trunk. Show the whole jungle how strong you are." Rhino puffed out his chest, stalked up the hill rumbling. "My mind is working very smoothly today." "Carefully," said Tweeter, moving towards him. "Snake's advice is not worth following." "Me? Listen to Snake?" growled Rhino. "I do my own thinking." Tweeter shook his head. "He's on the way to trouble." Far ahead something great and grey and still blocked the track. A snaky smirk spread over Nzoka's face as he watched. Rhinoceros peered into the distance. "Elephant," he rumbled. Two huge front feet pounded the ground. "Why should Elephant stand where I want to go?" Snake whispered. "He's big. He's important." "So am I. I'll show him horns are better than tusks," interrupted Rhino. Waves of heat shimmered around a boulder-covered hill. Below him the sun shone dazzlingly on the waters of the river. There was the colour of fire in his small eyes. The redder they became, the worse they worked. Rhino snorted and ground his teeth. "Like his hide." At the top of his voice he roared, "Out of my way! Get out of my way! You there! Do you hear me? Get out of my way!" His horn pointed directly towards the great grey something that showed up sharply against the skyline. Jojo scurried over and stood right in front of Rhino. "We know you don't like Elephant, but if you think that's—" A bellow from Rhino interrupted him. "Shut your mouth, will you?" Jojo didn't move. "Anyone with half an eye can see that this isn't—" "Shut up, shut up, shut up!" roared Rhino, moving forward, his eyes fixed on the hillside. His voice was hoarse. "Turn your back on me, would you? Take no notice of me, eh? Sitting in the middle of my path, block where I want to go, would you?" He stopped for breath. Snake smiled a scaly smile and thought, "Exactly what I want." Down went Rhino's head. Out stuck his horn. He stamped his feet. Dust rose in clouds. The hillside looked red, and though he couldn't see clearly, the grey shape made anger boil inside his head. Rumbling furiously, 2 tons of temper went tearing up the slope. Closer and closer he thundered. Bigger and bigger loomed his target, grey, solid and very large. Rhino pointed his head at its middle, shut his eyes and hurtled forward. Wallop! Oh! Into a great grey granite boulder. Stars whirled around Rhino's head. Big, dazzling, exploding stars. He groaned. Never had there been such a headache in all the jungle. Wow, said Tally and Callie in the same breath. Rhino was very stupid. Watch it, smiled Dowdy. Rhino certainly was a skinful of selfishness and pride. But be careful, it could easily happen to you if you turn your back on God and shut your ears to what he says. Anyone who's travelling God's road and has asked the Lord Jesus Christ to be in charge of his life knows where the world's worst headaches and heartaches come from. End of chapter 1.